The great ship, the voice of reason, moved quietly through the dark. It was near the edge of the star system that humans called Sol. The planet Pluto was a small, frozen dot in the distance. Inside the ship, the mood was calm. The crew had been on patrol for a long time and nothing ever happened out here. Captain Minsu sat in his chair on the bridge. He was a patient man. His long fingers tapped slowly on the armrest. He looked at the star charts on his screen. They showed nothing new, nothing interesting. This was a boring job, watching over the youngers. That is what the Galactic Consensus called the humans. The Galactic Consensus was a union of many alien species. They were old and advanced. They had found humans only a few generations ago. They saw humans as a young, loud, and simple species. Humans were good at making music and art, the Consensus thought, but their technology was like a child's toy. It was not serious. At her station, Gia listened to the silence. She was the communications officer. She was young and very smart. She wanted to see exciting things. But out here, there was only empty space and static. She watched the different lights on her panel, hoping for a signal that never came. The rest of the crew were all different types of aliens. Some had smooth blue skin, others had many eyes. They spoke in soft clicks and hums. They were all sure of their place in the universe. They were the teachers. Humanity was the student. A soft beep sounded from the sensor station. The officer there, a being named Kalox, tilted his head. "Captain," he said, "I am seeing something." Minsu looked up. "What is it, Kalox?" "It is a sensor contact. Very large. It was not there a moment ago." "Show me," Minsu said. A new image appeared on the main screen. It was a shape, a blip of data. It was huge. The computer said it was the size of a small moon, but it was cold. It gave off no heat. Its engines were silent. It had no power signature. It was just a solid, dark object, drifting slowly. Its path was taking it toward the inner planets, toward Earth. The crew on the bridge became very quiet. This was not normal. "Where did it come from?" Gia asked. "No one knows," Kalak said. "It just appeared. It does not move like a ship. It moves like a rock. A very, very big rock." Captain Minsu felt a small worry in his mind. This was strange. "Is it a planetoid? Something we missed?" "The charts are clear, Captain. There is nothing there. Or there was nothing there." They watched the object on their screens. It was a mystery. It broke the rules of space travel. How could something so big be so cold and dead? How could it move without engines? "Try to hail it," Minsu ordered. Gia sent out a standard greeting. "Unidentified vessel, this is the Galactic Consensus Cruiser Voice of Reason. Please identify yourself." They waited. There was no answer. Only silence. She tried again, using other languages. She even used the simple human languages. Still nothing. "Maybe it is just a space rock," one of the other officers said. "Rocks do not appear from nothing," Kalox replied, his voice tense. Minsu made a decision. "Bring us closer. Let us get a visual." The voice of reason turned smoothly. Its engines glowed as it moved toward the unknown object. As they got closer, the sensor data became clearer. The object was not a natural shape. It had straight lines and sharp angles. "Captain," Kalak said, his voice now full of surprise, "it is not a rock. It is a structure. A ship." A wave of murmurs went through the bridge. A ship? A ship that big? It was impossible. No one built ships that big. The energy required would be insane. The Consensus's largest flagship was like a pebble next to this thing. "On screen," Minsu said, his voice low. The main screen changed. It showed the object, magnified many times. The crew of the Voice of Reason saw it clearly for the first time. It was a warship. Its design was like nothing they had ever seen. The ships of the Galactic Consensus were beautiful. They were smooth and curved, like things grown in a garden. This thing was brutal. It was all hard edges and flat surfaces. It was made of a dark gray metal that seemed to swallow the light from the stars. Its surface was covered in thousands of scars and dents, like it had been flying through storms of space dust for 1,000 years. Along its sides they could see panels and ports. They looked like closed doors, they looked like gun ports. This is not a human design, Gia said softly. Is it? Of course not, another officer scoffed. The humans cannot build a station this large, let alone a mobile warship. It must be from another species, one we have not met. But Minsu was not so sure. He looked at the ship. He saw the way it was built. It was not beautiful, but it looked strong. It looked purposeful. It looked human. In a way the consensus never understood. Humans built things to be strong, not to be pretty. As they looked, the computer found something on the ship's hull. On the very front, near the bow, there was writing. It was faded, but it was there. Can you enhance that? Minsu asked, pointing. Kalox worked at his panel. The image zoomed in and cleared. The writing was in an alphabet they did not know. It was blocky and simple. What does it say? Gia asked. The computer tried to translate. It had records of all known languages, including human ones. After a moment, a single word appeared on the screen. You're okay. What is Yurok? Someone asked. No one had an answer. Captain Minsu felt his worry grow. This was bad. A ship this size, this powerful, sitting in human space. Who did it belong to? Why was it here? Why was it silent? Send a full report to the Consensus High Council, he ordered Gia. Tell them we have found an unknown vessel of immense size and possible military nature. We are investigating. Gia began to type the message. She described the ship. She called it a super dreadnought because no other word fit. Suddenly, a loud alarm blared through the bridge. A red light flashed. Captain, Kalak shouted. Energy spike. Massive energy spike from the unknown vessel. On the screen, the dark ship began to change. All across its vast, dark surface, small squares of metal slid open. From inside, they could see the glow of energy weapons powering up, thousands of them, like a city waking up and turning on its lights at once. A deep, low hum vibrated through space. It was so powerful that the voice of reason could feel it in its hull, the sound of a giant waking from a long sleep. Then, the main reactor of the giant ship ignited. It was like a small star being born. The sensors on the voice of reason went wild. The energy reading was so high it went off the scale. It was more power than their entire fleet used in a year. The crew was frozen. They stared at the screen in terror. The silent, dead rock was now the most powerful weapon they had ever seen. Gia looked at her communication panel. The message to the council was only half-typed. She knew she had to send something. They had to be warned. Her hands shook as she opened the ship-wide channel. She pressed the button to send a voice message to the consensus. Her voice was tight with fear. It's not a ship. It's a fortress. As she said the last word, the main screen of the voice of reason turned completely white. The alien ship, the Yurok, had finished waking up, and it had noticed them. The panic on the bridge of the voice of reason was a quiet, cold thing. There were no screams. The crew was too well trained for that. But the air grew still. The soft hum of the ship's systems was now drowned out by the frantic beeping of alarms and the low, terrifying vibration coming from the giant warship. Captain Minsu was the first to break the silence. His voice was calm, but it had a sharp edge. Evasive action. Now. Get us away from that thing. The helmsman, a being with 3 long-fingered hands, grabbed his controls. The voice of reason tilted sharply and began to move. Its engines glowed bright, pushing it away from the Yurok, but it felt like they were moving through thick mud. The giant ship seemed to fill the entire view from the windows. Shields to maximum, Minsu ordered. The shield officer confirmed the order. A shimmering blue energy field flickered around their ship. It was a strong shield, designed to withstand pirate attacks and asteroid collisions. Looking at the thousands of weapon ports now glowing on the Yurok, Minsu knew their shield was like paper. Any response to our hails? He asked Gia. Gia shook her head, her face pale. Nothing, Captain. They are completely silent. It is like like we are not even worth talking to. On the sensor screen, they could see the energy levels of the Urok still climbing. It was impossible. No power source could be that strong. The light from its reactor was brighter than the distant sun. "What is it doing?" Kalox whispered, his eyes fixed on his screen. Then, as suddenly as it started, the alarm stopped. The weapon ports on the Urok did not fire. The intense energy reading stabilized. The giant ship simply sat there humming with power, its weapons aimed out into space, ignoring the tiny cruiser right next to it. It was waiting. "Captain," Jia said, her voice trembling with relief and confusion. It is not attacking us." Minsu let out a breath he did not know he was holding. His heart was beating very fast. "Hold our position. Do not make any sudden moves. It seems we are beneath its notice." For a long moment, everyone on the bridge just watched the sleeping giant that had woken up beside them. It was a terrifying sight. The Urok was not sleek or beautiful. It was a thing of pure function. Every line, every weapon spoke of a single purpose: destruction. Did the message get through to the consensus? Minsu asked. Jia checked her panel. The transmission was sent, but it was fragmented. The energy spike from the Urok caused massive interference. They will have received only part of it. Minsu nodded. It would have to be enough. He had a bad feeling that the galaxy was about to change. Far away on the beautiful green planet that was the capital of the galactic consensus, the message from the voice of reason arrived. It was broken and full of static. In a large circular room, the High Council was in session. The walls showed peaceful scenes from different worlds. The council members, representing many species, sat on soft floating platforms. A council aide approached the head of the council, an old being named Elder Nim. "Elder, we have received a distressed communication from the cruiser Voice of Reason. It is incomplete." "Play it," Elder Nim said, his voice slow and deep. The audio crackled through the room. They heard Jia's voice tight with fear. "A contact. Massive size. Not on any registry. Weapons. Power levels. It's not a ship. It's a fortress." Then silence. The council members looked at each other. A few of them made soft, chuckling sounds. "Captain Minsu is a good officer, but he has an active imagination," one counselor said. She had shimmering silver skin. "A fortress? In the Sol system?" "It must be a sensor ghost," said another. "The human systems are primitive. Their data is often messy. It probably confused the Voice of Reason's computers." Elder Nim held up a hand for quiet. "Or it is a human trick." The room grew attentive. "The humans," Elder Nim continued, "are an emotional species. They crave attention. They wish to be seen as important. Perhaps they have built some large, crude space station. Perhaps they are making it look like a weapon to frighten us, to get a better trade deal, to get more votes on the council." There were nods of agreement around the room. This made sense to them. The youngers were always trying to prove themselves. This was just another one of their loud, clumsy attempts. "We shall send a message to our liaison on Mars," Elder Nim decided. "We will ask him to look into this fortress. For now, we will assume it is nothing. The humans are not capable of building anything that could truly shake the galaxy." The council moved on to other business. The broken message from the Voice of Reason was forgotten. They were sure of their power. They were sure of their place. They were the teachers. The humans were the students. A student cannot surprise a teacher. On Mars, the air was thin and red. The human colonies were busy places. Ships came and went from the spaceport. The buildings were strong and practical, made for survival in a harsh environment. In a command center buried deep under a large mountain, Fleet Admiral June sat at his desk. He was an older man with a grim face and deep lines around his eyes. He was looking at a small black communication device. It was a very old and simple machine. It had only one purpose. The device had no screen. It only had a single small light. For 50 years, that light had been dark. Today, it was glowing with a steady green pulse. Admiral June looked at the light for a long time. He did not smile. He did not frown. He simply absorbed the meaning of it. The wait was over. The long, secret wait was finally over. He pressed a button on his desk. "Commander Subin, to my office now." A few moments later, the door opened and a woman walked in. She was young to be a commander, but her eyes were sharp and intelligent. She saw the Admiral's face and she saw the green light on the old device. She stopped walking. She understood immediately. "Is it time, sir?" she asked, her voice quiet. Admiral June nodded. "It is time. Aegis is awake." Subin took a deep breath. "Then the enemy is coming." "Soon," June said. "And the galaxy is not ready." They were never willing to listen. They called us paranoid. They called us warlike. He stood up from his desk. His movements were slow and heavy. "Now they will see what our paranoia built. Initiate protocol first light. Recall all civilian shipping from the outer lanes. Activate the Mars defense perimeter. All military personnel are to report to their stations. Quietly. We do not want to cause a panic." Subin saluted. "Yes, sir." She turned and left the room, already speaking into her communicator. Admiral June walked to the large window that looked out over the Martian landscape. He could see the lights of the city below. He thought of all the people. He thought of Earth, a blue-green jewel in the distance. He had just given the orders that would change humanity's place in the galaxy forever. They would be hated. They would be feared. But they would survive. That was all that mattered. Back near Jupiter, the main fleet of the Galactic Consensus was stationed. It was a beautiful fleet. The ships were white and silver, shaped like gentle curves and flowing lines. They were a symbol of peace and unity. The commander of the fleet, an admiral named Valerius, received the orders from the High Council. He listened to the broken message from the voice of reason. He smiled. It was a gentle, condescending smile. "The humans are playing games," he said to his second-in-command. "They have built some big toy and are trying to scare us. It is charming in a primitive way." He stood up. "We will go and see this fortress. We will show the youngers what a real fleet looks like. We will surround it, scan it, and then we will politely ask them to explain themselves. It will be a good lesson for them." The consensus fleet began to move. Dozens of beautiful, graceful ships left their station around Jupiter. They formed perfect, elegant lines. They moved as one, a ballet in space. Their goal was the strange, blocky ship near Pluto. They were not going to war. They were going to give a lesson. On the bridge of the Urok, Captain Dae-hyun watched the approaching fleet on his screen. His bridge was not bright and clean like the consensus ships. It was dark, lit by red and orange lights. The consoles were heavy and solid. His crew was small. They were all veterans. They did not speak much. They just watched and waited. A young officer named Hana sat at the weapons station. Her hands rested lightly on the controls. "The consensus fleet is approaching, Captain. They are in a standard formation. They are hailing us." Dae-hyun did not look away from the screen. "Ignore them. Their weapons are powered down," Hana reported. "Their shields are at low levels. They are not in a battle posture." Dae-hyun almost felt sorry for them. They were so sure of themselves. They had no idea what was coming. They were like children walking in front of a tidal wave. "Stand by all batteries," Dae-hyun said, his voice a low rumble. "Target their lead ship, the one they call the Starlight Banner." Hana's fingers moved over her panel. "Target locked. Mass drivers are charged. Energy weapons are ready." The Urok waited. It was a dark mountain in space. The beautiful white fleet of the consensus moved closer. They looked like a string of pearls against the blackness. Admiral Valerius on the bridge of the Starlight Banner was getting impatient. "No response to our hails? How rude. Open a channel to all frequencies. Let the humans hear this." He cleared his throat and spoke in a loud, clear voice. "Unidentified vessel in consensus space. This is Admiral Valerius of the Galactic Consensus Fleet. You are in violation of transit laws. Power down your engines and prepare to be boarded for inspection. This is your only warning." On the Urok, they heard the message. Dae-hyun smiled a thin, cold smile. "Sir?" Hana asked, her hand ready. Captain Dae-hyun looked at the image of the proud white flagship. He thought of all the years of secrecy, all the years of being called primitive, all the years of preparing for a war no one else believed in. The time for talking was over. "Fire," he said. "Create more chapters. Headings or parts numbers in each par." The word was simple. Quiet. It did not sound like an order that would change history. On the bridge of the Urok, the gunner Hana pressed a single button. There was no loud noise. There was only a deep, powerful thrum that vibrated through the entire ship. On the main screen, the crew watched as the forward section of the Urok lit up with fire. The mass drivers fired. They were not energy weapons. They were giant magnetic rails that launched solid metal projectiles. The projectiles were the size of small buildings. They moved at a speed that was almost impossible to see. On the bridge of the Starlight Banner, Admiral Valerius was still waiting for a reply. He was annoyed. These humans were so disrespectful. Then his sensor officer screamed, "Energy spike! Massive kinetic impact! Incoming!" Valerius did not even have time to ask what it was. The first projectile hit his ship. The beautiful white shields of the Starlight Banner flickered for a fraction of a second. They were designed to stop energy blasts and laser fire. They could not handle the raw physical force of the Urok's weapon. The shield shattered like glass. The projectile did not slow down. It tore through the polished hull of the flagship like it was made of paper. It smashed through decks, through engines, through crew quarters. It exited the other side of the ship, leaving a giant, gaping hole. For a moment, the Starlight Banner was just a ship with a hole in it. Then its main reactor lost containment. There was a flash of white light. The beautiful ship exploded. Pieces of white metal flew in all directions. Then there was nothing left but dust and silence. The rest of the consensus fleet froze. They could not understand what had happened. Their flagship was just gone, vanished. It had taken one shot. One single shot from the dark, ugly human ship. On the voice of reason, which was watching from a safe distance, Captain Min Su felt sick. Jia had her hands over her mouth. They had just seen the most powerful ship in the local fleet destroyed in the blink of an eye. The Urok was not finished. Its thousands of weapon ports now glowed brightly. Thin beams of red light shot out. These were point defense lasers designed to shoot down small, fast things like missiles, but the Urok was using them on the other consensus ships. The red beams swept across the beautiful white hulls. They cut the ships into pieces. It was like a hot knife cutting through butter. The ships broke apart silently in the vacuum of space. Some of them exploded. Others just drifted dead and dark. The battle was not a battle. It was a destruction. It was over in less than a minute. The beautiful consensus fleet was gone. Only a field of wreckage remained. The Urok moved. Its massive engines glowed, and it began to travel toward the inner solar system. It did not even seem to notice the destruction it had left behind. It had a destination. On the voice of reason, the crew was in shock. They were silent. They could not believe what they had just seen. Captain Min Su finally found his voice. It was a whisper. "Follow it. But stay far back. Do not get in its way." The Urok moved through space like a dark storm cloud. It did not head for Earth. It moved to a position between Mars and Jupiter. It stopped there. It turned, facing the outer darkness of the solar system. It was like a wall, a shield. It was waiting again. On Mars, Admiral June watched all of this on his screens. He saw the destruction of the consensus fleet. He felt no joy. He felt only a heavy sadness. It had to be done. They had to clear the area. They had to make a battlefield. His assistant, Commander Subin, came into the room. Her face was pale. "Sir, the reports from the outer settlements." They saw it. They are terrified. The Galactic Council is screaming. They are calling it an act of war. They are demanding we surrender the Urok and its crew. June nodded slowly. Of course they are. They still do not understand. Should we try to explain? Subin asked. It is too late for explanations, June said. They would not have believed us anyway. We tried long ago. He turned away from the screen and looked at an old picture on his wall. It was a picture of a young man smiling. It was June, 50 years ago. He was standing next to his friend, a brilliant scientist named Chul. They were both so young and full of hope. 50 years ago, June and Chul were not soldiers. They were explorers. They were part of a deep space archaeology team. Their job was to find old ruins from dead civilizations. One day they found something amazing. It was on a lonely moon far from any star. They found the ruins of a city. It was not a human city. It was not a consensus city. It was older than both. Much older. The buildings were strange and beautiful, but they were also broken. It looked like a war had happened there. A terrible war. June and Chul explored the ruins for months. They found libraries. They found records. The race that lived there was called the Qatari. They were a peaceful, advanced species. They had technology that even the consensus could not dream of. But the Qatari were gone. Wiped Out Chul was the one who found the war archives. He translated the Qatari language. He learned the truth. The Qatari were destroyed by a thing they called the Swarm. It was not a race in the normal sense. It was a cycle, a natural disaster that happened every few million years. The swarm was a wave of biomechanical ships. They were not intelligent. They were like locusts. They moved from star system to star system. They consumed everything. They took all the metal, all the resources, all the life. Then they moved on, leaving dead worlds behind them. The Qatari had tried to fight. They had tried to warn other species, but no one listened. The other species, like the consensus of that time, thought the Qatari were paranoid. They thought they were warmongers, so the Qatari built a weapon, a final desperate weapon, a super dreadnought which they called Aegis. It was designed for one purpose, to break the swarm, but they finished it too late. The swarm arrived. The Qatari fought. They killed many of the swarm ships, but in the end they were overwhelmed. Aegis was destroyed. The Qatari were erased from the galaxy. Before he died, the last Qatari scientist sent a message into the universe. A warning. The message was found by June and Chul. They brought the data back to Earth. They showed it to the leaders. At first, no one believed them. Then they checked the data. It was real. The threat was real. The swarm was coming. Their cycle was almost complete. Earth was in its path. The human leaders went to the galactic consensus. They showed them the Qatari records. They begged them to prepare, to build a fleet, to get ready for war. The consensus laughed. They said the data was a fake. They said the humans were making up a story to get more resources. They said humans were a violent, fearful species. They told them to go home and be peaceful. So humanity faced a choice. Lie down and die when the swarm arrived, or prepare in secret? They chose to prepare. They used the Qatari plans. They improved them. They poured all their resources for 50 years into one single project. They built a new Aegis, a better one. They built it in the dark, far from the inner planets. They used robots and a small, dedicated crew. They called it the Urok. The crew of the Urok were volunteers. They knew they might never see their families again. They knew the galaxy would hate them. Captain Dae-hyun was one of the first volunteers. He was a young pilot then. Now he was an old man, waiting for the enemy he had trained his whole life to fight. Back in the present, Admiral June looked away from the old picture. The memory faded. The fear and the hope of that young man were gone. Now there was only duty. He walked back to his screen. The Urok was still waiting, a silent guardian in the dark. Then a new alarm sounded. This was a different sound. A deeper, more urgent sound. It was the sound they had been waiting for 50 years to hear. Subin looked at the new data on her screen. Her blood went cold. Admiral! June looked at the sensor readings from the edge of the solar system. Beyond Pluto, beyond the orbit of Neptune, something was coming. Not one ship. Not 100. A cloud, a wave. It was so vast that it blocked out the stars behind it. The ships were ugly, organic shapes. They looked like bugs. They moved with a single terrible purpose. The swarm had arrived. Admiral June picked up his communicator. His voice was calm, but it carried the weight of all humanity. All stations, this is Admiral June, the enemy is here. This is not a drill. Execute protocol final guard. God be with us all. He looked at the image of the Urok alone against the coming darkness. The galaxy had shaken too late. The time for hiding was over. The real war was about to begin. The edge of the solar system was no longer empty. It was full of movement, of a silent, hungry darkness. The swarm did not announce its arrival with radio signals or hails. It simply came, a tide of jagged shapes and cold metal. Their ships were not built, they were grown. They looked like giant insects with sharp edges and glowing red points for eyes. They moved together, a cloud of locusts ready to consume everything in their path. Their first target was not the Urok. It was the closest thing with a power signature. The wreckage of the consensus fleet and the damaged cruiser, the Voice of Reason. On the bridge of the Voice of Reason, the crew watched in a new kind of horror. The destruction by the Urok had been fast and clean. This felt different. This felt evil. They are eating the wreckage, Kalak said, his voice trembling. On the screen, they could see the swarm ships latching onto the broken pieces of the Starlight banner. They used sharp metallic tentacles to tear the metal apart, pulling it into their own hulls. Then a group of smaller swarm ships broke off from the main cloud. They turned toward the Voice of Reason. They moved fast like a swarm of angry bees. Our shields are gone. Our weapons are offline, the weapons officer cried out. We cannot fight them. Captain Minsu looked at his crew. They were brave, but they were helpless. He felt a deep sadness. This was how it would end, not in a glorious battle, but as food for monsters. Send a distress call, he said quietly. On all frequencies, maybe. Maybe someone will hear it. Gia sent the call. It was a message of pure desperation. This is the consensus cruiser Voice of Reason. We are under attack by an unknown hostile force. We are disabled. Requesting immediate assistance. Anyone, please! She did not expect an answer. On the bridge of the Yurok, the distress call crackled over a speaker. The crew heard the fear in Jia's voice. Captain Dae-hyun listened, his face a stone mask. He looked at the main screen. The swarm was his target. Every second counted. To help the consensus ship would be a distraction. It would waste energy. It was not part of the plan. His gunner, Hana, looked at him. Captain? The consensus ship? Dae-hyun was silent for a long moment. He thought about the Qatari records. He thought about the billions of lives behind him on Mars and Earth. He thought about the cold logic of war. Then he thought about the people on that ship. They were not the enemy. They were just ignorant. He made his decision. Change course, Dae-hyun said, his voice low. Intercept those swarm fighters. Protect the cruiser. The Yurok, a mountain of metal and weapons, turned. It moved with a speed that was shocking for its size. It placed itself between the swarm and the tiny Voice of Reason. Then, the Yurok's point defense systems came to life. It was a beautiful and terrifying sight. Thousands of thin red laser beams shot out from the Dreadnought's hull. They moved so fast they looked like a solid wall of light. Every swarm ship that touched that wall vanished in a small, bright explosion. It was like watching a firework display of death. In less than 10 seconds, the swarm fighters that were attacking the Voice of Reason were gone. Wiped out. On the Voice of Reason, the crew watched, stunned. The giant human ship had just saved them. The ship that had destroyed their fleet had now become their protector. Gia looked at the screen, her eyes wide. Why? Why did they help us? Captain Minsu understood first. A terrible, cold understanding washed over him. Because we were not the enemy, he whispered. We never were. Now the main swarm force took notice of the Yurok. The cloud of enemy ships shifted. They recognized a threat. 1,000 larger swarm vessels began to move forward. They fired a volley of glowing green plasma bolts. The Yurok's shields glowed bright blue as the plasma bolts hit them. The ship shook, but it held firm. Return fire, Dae-hyun ordered. Target their capital ships. Break their formation. Hana worked her console. The Yurok's massive main cannon, the World Breaker, powered up. A blinding beam of white energy shot out from the bow. It cut a line through the center of the swarm formation. Dozens of the large bug-like ships were vaporized instantly. But for every ship destroyed, 2 more seemed to take its place. The swarm was endless. A new communication came into the Yurok. It was from Mars. Captain Dae-hyun, this is Admiral June. The swarm is trying to flank you. They are sending a group toward Mars. Our orbital defenses will not hold for long. Dae-hyun looked at his tactical map. It was true. A large group of swarm ships was moving around the main battle, heading directly for the Red Planet. We cannot let them reach Mars, Dae-hyun said. Hana, focus all forward batteries on that flanking group. Subin, get me a squadron of our fast attack ships. We need to slow them down. In the space around Mars, human pilots sat in their small, agile fighters. They were not like the beautiful consensus ships. They were tough, angular, and built for one thing: combat. A young pilot named Tae-min checked his controls. He heard the order from Commander Subin. His mission was simple: intercept the swarm flanking force. Cause as much damage as possible. Buy time for the Yurok. It was a suicide mission. Tae-min was not afraid. He had trained for this his whole life. He knew what was at stake. All right, everyone, he said to his squadron over the radio. Let's go say hello. The human fighters shot out from behind the Martian defense platforms. They were badly outnumbered. The swarm ships were bigger and had more weapons. The battle was chaotic. The human fighters flew like crazy, twisting and turning, firing their lasers. They were surprisingly effective. They targeted the engines of the swarm ships. They flew in close, where the bigger ships could not aim well. Tae-min saw a swarm ship lining up a shot on a Martian defense station. He pushed his throttle forward. I'm on it! He flew straight at the swarm ship, firing all his weapons. The enemy ship's hull cracked and sparked. But as he flew past, a plasma bolt from another ship hit his wing. "Mayday, mayday! I'm hit!" Taemin yelled. His fighter spun out of control. He was heading right for the swarm ship he had just damaged. He made a choice. "For Earth," he shouted, and he aimed his dying fighter right into the swarm ship's main reactor. The explosion was bright and short. It took out the swarm ship and 2 others nearby. Taemin was gone. The other pilots saw it. They did not mourn. They fought harder. They knew they could win this. They had to. Back at the main battle, the Yurok was taking a beating. It had destroyed hundreds of swarm ships, but it was alone. The green plasma bolts were slowly wearing down its powerful shields. Alarms were blaring all over the bridge. "Shields are down to 40%, an officer reported. Section 7 is reporting a hull breach," another yelled. Captain Dae-hyun held onto his chair as the ship shook from another impact. He looked at the main screen. The swarm was still coming. There were so many. He saw the data from the Martian battle. He saw the sacrifice of pilot Taemin. He saw the human fighters giving everything they had. He knew what he had to do. The Yurok could not win this battle alone. It could only break the swarm's attack. It could only give the galaxy a chance. He opened a channel to Admiral June on Mars. "Admiral," Dae-hyun said, his voice calm and steady, "the Yurok is too damaged to continue. We cannot let the swarm reach the inner planets." On Mars, Admiral June closed his eyes. He knew what was coming. He had known this was a possibility from the very beginning. "What is your plan, Captain?" June asked. Dae-hyun looked at the tactical map. There was one massive swarm ship at the back of the formation. It was different from the others. It was emitting a strange energy signal. He was sure it was the command ship, the brain of this part of the swarm. "I am going to ram it," Dae-hyun said. "I will take the Yurok right into its core. When I give the signal, I want you to fire every missile, every weapon you have at that spot. The explosion should be enough to break their coordination." There was a long silence on the channel. "Understood, Captain," June said finally, his voice thick with emotion. "It has been an honor." "The honor was mine, Admiral," Dae-hyun replied. "Tell our people, tell them we remember the Qatari. Tell them we did not fall too late." He closed the channel. He turned to his crew on the bridge. They were all looking at him. They were not afraid. They were resolved. Hana gave him a small, sad smile. "It was a good ship, Captain." Dae-hyun nodded. "It was. Now let's make its last moments count. All power to the engines. Set a collision course for the swarm command ship." The bridge of the Yurok was quiet. The only sounds were the steady beeping of consoles and the deep groaning sound of the ship itself. It was a wounded giant. Captain Dae-hyun stood at the center of it all. He looked at his crew. They were not running. They were not praying. They were working. They were making the ship ready for one last great effort. "All power to forward shields and engines," Dae-hyun said. His voice was calm. "Divert everything else." Hana's fingers flew across her panel. "Diverting power now. Forward shields at maximum. Engine output is at 120%. It will burn out the systems in minutes." "That is all we need," Dae-hyun said. On the main screen, the swarm command ship grew larger. It was a monstrous thing covered in spikes and glowing with a sickly green light. Around it, thousands of smaller swarm ships swarmed like flies, firing their plasma bolts at the Yurok. The human Dreadnought shook violently as it was hit again and again. Red lights flashed across the bridge. A console exploded in a shower of sparks. "We have lost main power in sections 1 through 5, an officer called out. "Does not matter," Dae-hyun said, his eyes fixed on the target. "Stay on course." On Mars, Admiral June stood in the command center. The room was silent, watching the main screen. They could see the Yurok, a single dark shape flying straight into the heart of the enemy swarm. It was like watching a hero from an old story, walking into his final battle. Commander Subin stood next to him. "All missile batteries are locked on the target coordinates. All defense platforms are ready." "We are waiting for your order, sir." June nodded. He could not speak. His throat was too tight. He thought of his old friend Chul, who had discovered the Qatari secret. He thought of Dae-hyun, who had given his life to this secret project. He thought of all the people on the Yurok who had volunteered to be the galaxy's shield, knowing they might never come home. He opened a channel to the entire human fleet. "All stations," June said, his voice strong and clear. "This is Admiral June. The Yurok has given us our chance. It has given the galaxy a chance. Do not waste it. On my mark, fire everything." Back on the Yurok, the noise was deafening. The ship was being torn apart. The air was getting thin. Alarms blared without stopping. "We are almost there," Hana said. She was strapped into her chair, her hands still on her console. Impact in 30 seconds, Daehyun opened a ship-wide channel. This would be his last message to his crew. "This is the captain," he said. "I will not lie to you. We are not going to survive this. But look at what we have done. We have shown them that humanity will not break. We have shown them that we will stand and fight, even when no one else will. We are the shield. Remember that. It has been the greatest honor of my life to serve with you all." He closed the channel. He looked at Hana. She looked back at him and nodded. "Impact in 10 seconds, she said. Daehyun took a deep breath. He pressed the button to talk to Mars. "Admiral, now." On Mars, Admiral June heard the word. He did not hesitate. "Fire!" he shouted. From the surface of Mars and from the orbital's platforms around it, 1,000 missiles launched at once. They streaked across the sky like a rain of fire. Every laser cannon, every railgun, every weapon that humanity had, fired at the same spot in space. The Yurok flew right into the center of the swarm command ship. The massive Dreadnought, built to be the strongest weapon in history, smashed into the organic hull of the enemy. For a single silent moment, nothing happened. Then, the Yurok's core reactor went critical. The explosion was like a new sun being born. A wave of pure white light expanded outwards, swallowing the swarm command ship and thousands of the smaller ships around it. The light was so bright that it was visible from Mars with the naked eye. Then the human missiles arrived, hitting the same spot. The explosion grew even larger, tearing through the heart of the swarm fleet. The swarm ships, which had been moving with a single purpose, suddenly became confused. They flew in random directions. They crashed into each other. Without the command ship to control them, they were just mindless animals. The battle was over. Silence returned to space. The field of wreckage was immense. Pieces of the Yurok and the swarm ships drifted together. It was a graveyard of metal. The voice of reason drifted at the edge of the battlefield. Its crew was alive. They had seen everything. Captain Minsu looked at the empty space where the Yurok had been. He felt a deep shame. He had called them monsters. He had thought they were the enemy. But the humans had sacrificed their greatest weapon and the lives of its brave crew to save them. To save everyone. Jia was crying quietly. "They saved us," she whispered. "They all died to save us," Minsu nodded. "We were wrong about them. We were all wrong." He turned to his communication officer. "Send a message to the Galactic Consensus. Use the clearest language you can. Tell them the Terran super Dreadnought Yurok is destroyed. Tell them it was destroyed defeating a common enemy that we were too proud to see. Tell them. Tell them that humanity has just saved the galaxy, and we did nothing to help them." On Earth, a few weeks later, a memorial service was held. It was not a noisy, happy event. It was a quiet, sad, and proud gathering. A great stone wall was built in the capital city. On it were carved the names of every person who had died on the Yurok, Captain Daehyun, Hana, and all the others. In front of the wall, people placed flowers and flags. Admiral June and Commander Subin stood before the wall. They did not speak. They just looked at the names. They remembered their friends. A shadow fell over them. Captain Minsu of the Voice of Reason stood there. He was not in his uniform. He was dressed in simple clothes. He bowed deeply to Admiral June. "Admiral," Minsu said, "on behalf of the Galactic Consensus, and on my own behalf, I apologize. We were blind. We were fools." June looked at the alien captain. He saw the honesty in his eyes. He saw the shame. He felt no anger. "Only tiredness. The past is done," June said. "The question is, what will you do now?" "The Consensus has seen the sensor data from my ship," Minsu said. "They have seen the recordings of the swarm. They know the truth now. They have offered humanity a new seat on the council, a seat of equals, not as youngers but as partners." Subin spoke softly. "And the swarm?" "This was only one group. There will be more." Minsu nodded. "We know, and that is why the Consensus has asked. No, they have begged. For your help. We want to build a new fleet, not our beautiful, weak ships. We want to build ships like the Yurok. We want you to teach us." Admiral June looked from Minsu to the memorial wall. He looked at the name Dae-hyun carved in the stone. His old friend had not died for nothing. He had died to wake the galaxy up. Very well, June said. We will teach you. Months passed. In the shipyards around Mars and Earth, and in the shipyards of the consensus worlds, new construction began. The designs were not beautiful or curved. They were angular and brutal. They were strong. The new ships were based on the plans of the Urok. They were smaller, but they carried the same powerful weapons. They were built by humans and aliens working together. Admiral June, now older and wearier, walked through one of these new shipyards with Commander Subin. They looked up at the hull of a nearly finished Dreadnought. It was a dark, gray, powerful thing. It is strange, Subin said. We spent so long hiding what we were building. Now we are building them for everyone. June nodded. The galaxy finally understands. To ensure peace, you must be ready for war. The Urok was our lesson. A hard lesson, but we learned it. He looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the rest of the swarm was waiting, but they were not afraid anymore. The galaxy was united. They were ready. The Terrans had shown them the way. The galaxy would never shake too late again.